Hey guys, what's going on? It's Space Cowboy here. Welcome back to the channel, and today we will be conducting our final review of the Dallas Cowboys season of 2019. We will be going through all of the things that have occurred from their offseason, the season itself, up until the very end. So feel free to put your phone down, listen to it while you're on the drive, all that other stuff, because it will be a decently long video. Also, if you're new, feel free to leave a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, leave a comment on how you felt with this season and how it's gone. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Now, the Dallas Cowboys entering 2019, they went 10-6. They won the division really at 9-6, but they basically went 10-6. They won a playoff game, and they got ousted by the Rams in the divisional round of the playoffs. Now, the Cowboys were looking to improve on this. People thought, hey, the Cowboys have their essence reborn. They got Amari Cooper, who really helped, get that season going, and they eventually went 10-6 and won the division, and they ended up getting to the playoffs, winning a playoff game. So let's start off with who left ultimately. And just as a heads up, like I mentioned, I understand that some of these players had left at some point or another during the 2019 season, whether that be the offseason or during the season. But I have to mention who we lost and who we kept in that, span of time. So we lost Rod Smith, we lost Cole Beasley and Allen Hurns, Terrence Williams, losing 3 receivers. We lost 2 tight ends, Enrico and Jeff Swain. We lost 2 offensive linemen in Parker Enger, I think that's it. I apologize, I probably butchered his name. And Marcus Martin. We lost 2 defensive ends in Taco Charlton, former first-round pick, and Dayton Jones. We lost 2 defensive tackles in David Irving and Kerryon Reed. We lost Damian Wilson, and we lost Marquestrin Huff and Brett Maher. Those were ultimately those that eventually left the team after either 2018 or 2019. So those are the players we either got rid of or did not bring back. In terms of who we brought back of re-signing, we brought back Jameez Olawale, Tavon Austin, Cameron Fleming, DeMarcus Lawrence, to that big deal. He was the biggest signing of the at that point of the offseason. Daniel Ross, Justin March, Darian Thompson, and LP Ladouceur. Now, as for signings, the Cowboys brought in Randall Cobb, Jason Witten out of retirement, Kerry Hyder, and Christian Covington, all to 1-year deals. Not only that, the Cowboys also brought in Robert Quinn for a 6th-round draft pick through the Miami Dolphins. Now, based off of this offseason, at the time, we were like, okay, the Cowboys kind of did what they normally do. They re-sign the players they want to keep, and they bring in some guys that are on for the cheap. Now, moving into the NFL draft. Now, before we get to that, I should also mention that the Dallas Cowboys also, they re-signed La'el Collins, and they also re-signed Ezekiel Elliott, and as well as Jalen Smith. They all signed those players to long-term deals. They just did that before the start of the regular season. And we'll get into those contracts once we get to the start of the season and how I feel on them. Now, as for the draft, the Cowboys did not have a first-round pick because we, traded it for Amari Cooper. The Cowboys selected Tristan Hill in the with their first pick in the 2nd round. Then they drafted Connor McGovern, guard out of Penn State. They drafted Tony Pollard, Michael Jackson, Joe Jackson, Donovan Wilson, Mike Weber, and Jalen Jelks. So they added a bunch of players to the team. This really felt like, okay, let's get some depth. That's what this draft kind of screamed out to me. It was like, hey, we're going to get some depth and maybe some developmental players. And not like they were all going to do a impact, they were going to have an impact. But, yeah. So, moving on, the Dallas Cowboys eventually got to their final roster after so long of, determining what they wanted to do with certain player and personnel. And, we thought that, hey, if I think the year was, Super Bowl or bust, and we mentioned, now looking at the coaching staff, the Cowboys brought in John Kitna, they brought in Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator. So those were the two coaching changes that really took place during this offseason. And a lot of questions were surrounding that. Can the Cowboys, can they make that next step? Can they finally get past that divisional round wall that we consistently see? And we're going to see, can, us getting rid of Scott Linehan take this team to a whole nother level? Now, getting on to the signings of players. Now, Lyle, a lot of people were questioning it, myself included. I didn't know if Lyle was coming back. So they re-signed Lyle to a 5-year deal. They re-signed Ezekiel Elliott to a 6-year extension. You know what I mean? Like, not what I mean by deals, I mean by extensions. Just as a heads up. And then they signed Jalen Smith, I believe, to a 5-year extension as well. So, looking at that, the Cowboys are, trying to retain their core players. And they've done a pretty good job at that over the past couple of years. And I think that was a pretty good move at that point in time. I think it's like, hey, you sign these players to, solid deals. And then you don't got to worry about them. And we'll talk about how I feel after these deals and, what can we look at going forward after we get through the season. Because we can't, say how they did during the season without, talking about what happened throughout the season. So, let's get past the preseason because really no one cares about the preseason. So we start in the Dallas Cowboys regular season. They started out against the New York Giants. They won 35-17. Really, it was 35-10. And that was like, wow, okay, this team, we think this team's ready to go. Then, and Dak looked fantastic. The running game, well, Zeke did not, he kind of eased in because of the contract holdout he did. But the Cowboys looked really good. I mean, Cooper had 100 yards plus. So did Michael Gallup. Cowboys looked like they were going to fire on all cylinders. And that continued into Washington the following week when they defeated the Redskins 31-21. Again, Dak Prescott looked magnificent. The offense looked prolific. Zeke got into the end zone again. Things were going well. It even, after a slow start against the Miami Dolphins, who hadn't won a game at that point, they managed to get to 3-0 for the first time since 2008. And, Pete, we were excited. We were like, wow, this team is finally hitting on all cylinders. But, granted, it was against subpar talent and opponents, but we were excited nonetheless. Then the Cowboys, Sunday Night Football, they go up against the New Orleans Saints and get their first loss of the season. Granted, a close game at that. The Cowboys were up 10-9 at one point. They finally got themselves going to get into the end zone. But unfortunately, even though they held the Saints, who did not have Drew Brees at this point in time, they held them to no touchdowns, they still lost this game. We're like, hey, you're not going to win them all. You learn from it, and we move on. Next, we had the huge crucial matchup versus the Green Bay Packers. The Packers, they looked really good. And we thought that, hey, they're coming to our house. I think we'll be able to take care of business. So the Cowboys eventually, they went on the field against the Packers, and they got completely demolished at the start of the game. It was 31-0 at one point. Cowboys tried to make things interesting, but it was too little too late. Dak Prescott committed, 3 interceptions, which was horrid, to say the least. Even though he tried to get the team out of that hole, did not work. Plain and simple. And now the Cowboys were sitting at 3-2, and we questioned the coaching decisions, and we were like, hey, we played two good teams, can't get any worse, right? Well, Cowboys go to New York, or more so New Jersey, to face the Jets, and they were getting pummeled by the Jets. They got freaking punched in the face. Cowboys tried to make things interesting by mounting a comeback. They couldn't get the 2-point conversion to go into overtime. And they dropped to 3-3, and a lot of questions started running. Is Dak Prescott the guy? Is the coaching staff? What is going on? And at this point, I was just like, what? Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. And we questioned it. It looked bad. And, granted, the Cowboys were very injured in this game. With Amari Cooper being out and not a lot of, I think there was a couple linemen out as well, if I recall. I think both of our tackles were out during this game. along with the Green Bay Packer game at some point. But I do believe that the Cowboys really wish they could have had that game back. Then we faced the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles, they were 3-3 coming into this game. So were we. We destroyed them 37-10, and we went into the bye week with high hopes. We're like, hey, maybe we found our groove again after we hit an all-time low. So let's keep it going. Then we faced the Giants on Monday Night Football. We beat them 37-18 after a first play of the game interception by Dak. I mean, it looked pretty bad, and then the Cowboys kind of got in groove after a bit and all that other stuff. So then they went in the Sunday Night Football against the Vikings at home. The Vikings were up 14-0. Cowboys come back to take the lead, and then all this, and Dak looked fantastic, and then the Cowboys, this is where I think, you know, during the season, we were like, okay, this was 100% on coaching. You know, I know we have our disagreements on whether it was the players or the coaching staff, but that game was a real testament to how the coaching staff got in the way of their player success. Dak Prescott having one of his better games of his career, and how masterful he was with how he controlled the pace of the offense. Take the ball out of his hands and the Cowboys lose. They go into Detroit. They beat the Lions 35-27, a very unnecessarily close game than it needed to be. And a lot of people were like not satisfied with that. They were like, hey, you know, we shouldn't be allowing a backup quarterback, backup running back, etc. to put up 27 points on you. But I digress. Cowboys managed to get to 6-4. Now, the Cowboys entered New England. Now, this was going to be a tough game either way. And the thing was that the Cowboys were in this game, but they did not get into the end zone. You know, they had a chance at the end to try and drive and win the game. Unfortunately, Amari Cooper couldn't catch the ball. But overall, I mean, this was another thing. I mean, it was the players, it was the conditions, it was everything. I mean, another team lost at that. Then moving into Buffalo the following week on Thanksgiving, they open up really well against the Bills, and we think, okay, Cowboys are back in business. Then they end up falling behind, and it was too little too late. The Cowboys eventually lost 26-15. Then, oh Lord, this game. The Chicago Bears game. This was a huge game. Thursday Night Football. The Cowboys are just trying at this point to stay afloat and just basically hope they can get some momentum so that they can at least put the division away. Because, again, during this game, the Cowboys were still leading. I believe the Dallas Cowboys had led the division the entire way up until week 16. So just keep that in mind as well. The Cowboys eventually fell to the Bears after another strong drive to start the game. And it was another poor performance. The Cowboys showed up a little too late, and they ended up losing 31-24. Now, a lot of us were like, okay, there's no way in hell they're beating the Rams, all this other stuff. They just beat the Rams 44-21. They just destroyed them in the first half, take care of business in the second half, pulling the starters and everything. Get to 7-7. Put yourself in a position to where if you win, you're in against the Eagles. I went to this game. The Cowboys looked like they didn't want it at all. The Cowboys lost 17-9. They were down 10-0 early. They tried to claw back into this game, and it was just too little too late. The Cowboys looked like they didn't want it. Looked like the coaches didn't know what they were doing. The players didn't look like they wanted to be there. All that other stuff. So the Cowboys dropped to 7-8. And then finally, they won 47-16 over the Redskins, finishing 8-8 once again for the fourth time in the Jason Garrett era. And as a result, they miss out on the playoffs due to the Eagles defeating the Giants 34-17. Now, what does this tell us about this team? Well, as you know, I love to coin Bill Parcells' sayings, and, you know, you are what your record says you are, and the team was average. You know, and that isn't just with the players, but also the coaching staff as a whole. This was a testament to how the Cowboys were being held back by the coaches. There would be games where they didn't look prepared. There would be games where it looked like they didn't want to play. I mean, it just looked bad. I mean, 2-3 loss streaks, just horrible, absolutely horrid by the Cowboys. And they can't be doing this. This is something that they cannot afford to do. And I think that the Cowboys need to go into this offseason looking at themselves and saying, we need to really shake things up. Now, I will point out a couple things. Now, in terms of the winners and losers for this season, number one, let's just go down the list. I'm going to go from the offense to the deep. We're going to talk about the players first before we get to, because we know we already talked about the coaching. Quarterback, Dak Prescott really grew in this season. He threw for 30 touchdowns for the first time this season. Whether you want to say, it was in garbage time or not, Dak Prescott really took a step as a quarterback, and that could be be given thanks to John Kitna, who did a fantastic job with growing Dak Prescott as a passer. Dak looked great. He was 1 yard off Tony Romo's passing yards record for the Cowboys, but I honest to God don't care about that. I think that Dak knows this, that he wants to win. I would rather have been in the playoffs than him get that record, and that's plain and simple, But, Dak Prescott had a fantastic season in terms of statistics, and he showed that, yes, he looks good as a quarterback. Yes, there are times where he played bad, but at the end of the day, he showed what he can do, especially when the game plan all comes together. As for Ezekiel Elliott, he definitely improved upon his previous year's mark. He got 12 touchdowns, definitely doing a lot better than last year, getting into the red zone a bunch more. He actually finally, this season, he had 2 games where he had 2+ rushing touchdowns. And that's important because the Cowboys, and you might say, oh, why is it important that he gets in the end zone twice? It's just because, listen, our identity is running the football, I thought. So, it shows that, hey, listen, Zeke still has it. It's not like we gave him a mistake in giving him money, because he was up there in terms of rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. So he kind of got back in groove, finally getting back into the double digits there. As for Tony Pollard, he is, in my opinion, my rookie of the year. I think that Tony Pollard did a fantastic job, especially with what we could do. I think that we found something in a backup running back, and I think if the next coach of the Cowboys can use that to his advantage, I think the Cowboys can be very scary, especially if we use them correctly. And we saw that. Tony Pollard had, great runs here and there, and I think that if the Cowboys can use him a whole lot more, that'd be great. Moving to receiver, I gotta say, Michael Gallup, breakout player, 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. He had a hat trick game versus Washington in the final game. And, he has such great playmaking ability, and it's something that we needed from a receiver in quite some time. He's looking fantastic, And not only that, Amari Cooper, he had a career year as well, granted by not a whole lot of yards, but I believe, if I remember correctly, he has now set new career marks for touchdowns and yardage, and I think passes caught too. He had overall a more effective year than ever before in his career, and I think that with the Cowboys having 2 1,000-yard receivers, it definitely shows that the Cowboys have that potential with Gallup and Cooper. As for Cobb, fantastic. Cobb had those moments where I really think that I don't know what the hell was going on. But overall, I think the Cowboys did I think that was a solid grab in free agency, Randall Cobb, I think, was a far better upgrade over Cole Beasley, and I still believe that. Yes, Cobb had drops, and I still am pissed off to that. So am I about Gallup and Cooper. They all dropped. I think we led the league in dropped passes, and that's not acceptable. But the Cowboys showed that they have a solid receiving core, I really hope they can bring Cooper. If Cobb can come back on a cheap deal, that'd be great, or maybe it's a 3-year deal, that'd be awesome. But I can understand if he leaves, I think the Cowboys bringing him, I like what they have at that position. And I would really hope that they can bring that cohesion, back into 2020. Moving to the offensive line, the reason I'm going to probably skip tight ends is, listen, it's Jason Witten. Blake Jarwin, I think he broke out here and there, and I would like to see him get more touches, and I hope Witten is done with the Cowboys. I think that he is a progress stopper. As for Schultz, we don't know what we could get in him. I know he's been a blocking tight end for the most part, but he's had a couple things here and there, but I really hope the Cowboys can see what they can do with that tight end spot. As for the offensive line, Travis Frederick coming back. Glad to see him back. I think, he wasn't on par with, his other all-pro seasons, in my opinion, but I still believe that he had a great season. Lyle taking the best step forward. Lyle looked fantastic at right tackle. Yes, he had his hiccups at time to time, but he looked really good. I mean, I think a lot of us were shocked by that, and I would have to give him, personally, if I had to give most improved player, it'd have to go to Lyle. And that's being 110% honest with you. He looked great. Tyron Smith, he missed some games here and there. His health's been a question, but he still looks really good. Zach Martin, best guard in the league by far. And left guard, we had Connor Williams. He definitely looked like he improved, but he could do a lot better. When Xavier Suafilo stepped in, and then eventually Joe Looney, things looked a bit slightly better. But overall, I think that left guard, as long as we have security there, I think the continuity will increase. And I think the Cowboys will eventually click on all cylinders. And their offensive line looked solid, but there were moments where they didn't. Let's be honest. The Cowboys' offensive line had moments where they didn't know what they were, they just couldn't do anything. And I think that that's huge going forward. I think that as long as we can make sure that we can get better depth constantly, I think we'll be fine there. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, Robert Quinn, fantastic addition to the Cowboys. I think he had like 10.5 sacks at this point. And I mean, I think that the Cowboys should do everything in their power to bring him back. I think that he was something that the Cowboys needed. They needed another reliable pass rusher, and the Cowboys got that. Yeah, we could talk about DeMarcus Lawrence and him not getting his sack numbers all the way up there, but he did play a crucial role in, diverting attention elsewhere. The defensive tackle spot, they really need to improve on that. There was no pressure from the middle of the defensive front. And I think they really need to evaluate getting a very strong defensive tackle in this upcoming draft or free agency period. And that, look, the Cowboys need a better defensive tackle. They haven't had a top-tier, high-quality defensive tackle in years. And I think they really need to reinvest in that position, hopefully in this upcoming draft or with the free agency pickup. As for the linebackers, and we could talk, the rotation was solid with the Cowboys defensive line. I think it could have done a whole lot better considering the situations we were in. Unfortunately, a step back from Leighton and Jalen. Sean Lee, he would have his moments here and there, but I really, I gotta look at this, and it really says a testament that, look, Leighton and Jalen need one another because they cover up each other's deficiencies, and we saw that. Once Leighton went out, the defense did not look as up to par as we would think. Granted, they weren't having an outerworldly season, but I will say that with hearing that Leighton had the surgery on his neck. Hopefully he's all good. I think he'll be fine, but I really hope that he is, because I think that him and Jalen, we have a solid duo. I think if not the best in the league, and I think that as long as those two are on the field, this defense is going to be solid. Now, getting to the cornerback and say a safety spot, Cheeto did not have a good year. He had probably the worst year of his 3-year career at this point. Jordan Lewis made plays, not all the time, but he made plays. And Byron, he did his thing here and there. I would love to see if they could bring Byron back on a solid deal. If not, I don't know. I just think that the Cowboys could maybe see an upgrade at that position, possibly. Even at the safety spot. Look, Jeff Heath, solid. Xavier Woods looks solid as well. I do believe, however, that the Cowboys they really need an upgrade at that safety position. And, I think this defense isn't as good as we think it is, and I think that we need to seriously, maybe we need to maybe switch up the scheme, add some more players, whatever the case may be. I'm just trying to wrap this up because I don't want to go on for 30 minutes. As for special teams, they really needed to let Brett Maher go. I understand he kicked, 60-yard field goals. I don't really give a damn about that because guess what? He missed a ton of kicks, okay? He missed like 10 plus kicks or something like that, even more probably. Kai Forbath, I think we found something in him. I do like what he brought to the table, and I hope he comes back. Bring him back on a 1-year deal, see what he can do, or make it a 3-year deal, but with like a you know, make it like whatchamacallit's deal, all the Wale's deal, where it's like an option year for the Cowboys. But overall, I think that the Cowboys found themselves a new kicker, but at the end of the day, I think they waited way too long on Brett Maher, and that's so ends the Cowboys 2019 season. As for 2020, what do I want? First start is a head coach. If the Cowboys do not get another head coach, this is not going anywhere. So, yeah, we'll talk about that later on. I want to also basically do a channel review as well, just seeing what I want to do for 2020 and all that other stuff. So, with that being said, I will see you guys later. See you guys in 2020, and hopefully we get a new head coach. All right, guys. See you. Bye-bye.
I used to live in Sin Cities like Bruce Willis, but I'm Jackie Chan, karate chopping, I'm still kicking. I used to be chopped and screwed, I'm Lil flipping. Now I'm nice, Mike Jordan, so who's pippin'? I'm running man, you the running man, you still slipping. I hit records, you swinging, it's still